right? So I'm here with Hobo. He was a member and founder of one of the most prolific and powerful clans since 2017. It's 2021, so you may realize that's been a few years. He's a player of all three races. He is credited behind the scenes with helping multiple people with their campaigns and maps. And he is obviously, mostly what we're here for is he's a prolific caster and involves himself in tournament play throughout LittleWarGame's history. Hobo, how are you doing?
Pretty well.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. So let's I guess but for most people, it's not interesting to start from the beginning. Oh, well, how did you start the? Oh, I wasn't interested, and then I joined. I was did this and that. It's like okay, but at a certain point, this is more interesting on your behalf, right? Because you've been involved. I just checked the thing. You've been involved in Little Wargame, or at least joins December of 2016, and you had this massive clan in 2017. So what has changed for you? Why are you sticking with Little Wargame after all these years?
There's always something new to move on to. When I first started playing, I was all about trying to be competitive, working the struggle from Division 3 to Division 2. As soon as that got old, I had something else to move to, working on the clan. After that, mod making, and then down the road, as we went further down the rabbit hole, started casting.
Yeah, so let's go into a little bit of pretty much all of those sections. We're going to backtrack just a tiny bit. So there's obviously a lot to do in Little Wargame, and the first area that I want to talk to was what you were saying about going from Division 3 to Division 2. If you look in people's profile, there's a lot of people that are they're rank 2, maybe a lot of the well-known people are at least rank 1. And you look and you think, oh, that's odd. I don't see when did all these people get all of these divisions? There was a time right about when you joined, like 2016, 2017, people could not get enough of ranked. There were people who were trying to push into gamma and beta and all of these other kinds of firsts. So why ranked play? Did you come from some other game where you liked ranked play? Did you just like this game first the most? Like what got you into
I,
it?
I started this game as my first real RTS using a Chromebook and a trackpad.
Oh, no, okay, all right. That must have sucked. There's no nice way to say that. That must have been awful.
I didn't get amounts until I got to Division 2, probably in 2017.
Okay, okay. Anyone
But
notable that you beat with just a trackpad?
there's one video on YouTube from Slammer. It's Hobo versus Chomsky. I think it's at 5.4 thousand views right now.
Okay, pretty good. And you beat him with a trackpad. Or her,
I
but
did
whatever
lose
the
that
case may
game.
be. Oh
I did
no.
lose that one in the end. It was
Okay,
close.
okay. Because Norm and I were talking about this a bit behind the scenes. Just imagine trying to play with a trackpad. All of you at home, I want you to imagine not having a mouse and then having to use your hand as part of your keyboard, but to select. That must have been terrible. So after you got to that point, you hit your goal for ranked, and then you moved on from there. Why the next step? Because you seem very interested in just all facets of the game. That you've mentioned mod making and casting. What do you like about mod making?
In part, I liked some of the challenges, trying to take the building blocks and make something completely new. Uh, I started off with modifying a map made by Dragon Archer Z, Probes versus Protoss versus Protoss, where I used the mod elements to create a system where you could place a building that would build itself. From there, I went on to other stuff like making PVC, and then started helping a lot of other people with their own custom mods.
What's interesting about that is that I do remember, because I was a person who was very interested in map making at the time. I think at the time I was working on autocast triggers and things of that nature that people weren't really touching in the editor. And I remember seeing that and seeing that you could place this building in this mod that you're talking about, and all of a sudden it would build it, and then it would almost destroy it, and then it would slowly build back up from there. Like, where did you even come up with these ideas? Because most people now, like, we have the Discord, and there's a separate map area where people can talk about this, but that's pretty impressive to have come up with that. Do you have any background in working in other editors?
Nope. Again, this was the first game I really got into. Um, it mostly was trial and error over like 3 days.
Awesome. So most people can't be, they're trying to figure out how to do things such as, how do I make this thing respond? And back in 2017, with a much less active, let's say, or much less coalesced community, over 3 days, you just figure out how to make one of the race mechanics of StarCraft 2 in a little wargame editor. That's absolutely insane. So one of the primary topics I wanted to get into is that as you're moving through this and you're changing interests in Little Wargame, something I found interesting is that as you change your own interests, even if your point of focus changes, the things that you were originally interested in or had garnered your attention continue to evolve on their own. So, how had the game changed from the time that you had been playing as a caster and working on all of these mods, some of them quite groundbreaking, frankly? By the time you're a caster, does the ranked game even look the same anymore? Like, did you approach it from a new angle? What had changed for you?
I definitely think that starting to cast changed my perception of it. For the longest time, I was actually a beast main until I want to say it was just before the AA4 updates. I had started to use catapults with archers a lot, and then I don't know if I was one of the first, or I don't know if I was the first rather, but I think I was one of the first to really use the mech style when the Gatling guns and everything else were introduced. Um, but even then, I still was using one race at a time. It was when I started casting and trying to see what each player would do in each situation, how would a beast respond to a Rax drop, that I really started to have an interest in playing all three instead of just any one.
Now, what's curious about that is that obviously playing all three races to at least a competent level would be very useful for casting because you have this more informed perspective. And for anyone who missed it, you were on Norm's channel, I think yesterday or the day before, and it almost looked like you went out of your way in your match, your best of five turned best of three against Silver Boss, to show why, yes, I can in fact play every race to a pretty decent level, actually. Like, are there any holdovers? Do you still prefer Beast? Do you still have more of that mech strategy in mind? Like, do you value one over the other?
I would say Mech is kind of like a lazy build. It's very easy to be okay at it and very hard to be great at it.
Now that's not provoking. You can't stop with that. You've got to explain more. Okay, I've heard the perspective before, and there's some mumblings behind the scenes, and other people who have done these videos have expressed this idea that maybe Mech has a lower, like the floor is higher. It's easy to get some base utility out of Mech. Why do you think the high level of Mech is so much higher? What feeds into that?
A lot of it comes down to map awareness and micro abilities. Uh, in the best of three with Silver, for example, granted there's a high amount of lag, but being able to attack every angle at once, send drops in someone's side base, send drops in the main base, attack their main army, uh, just being able to apply unilateral pressure anywhere and everywhere on the map. It's something that takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice to do, and if you can do it right, causes a huge amount of damage.
Yeah, I mean, I've told the story a couple of times about how people learned that you could put catapults that are in an airship on a hotkey so that when they drop out of the airship, the purpose is just to have the catapults fire on the workers so they don't waste their first shot. Do you think that Mech has the highest skill ceiling?
I don't think any of the three of them have hit their ceiling yet, so I think that's hard to say.
Okay, all right.
Of the three, I think an integration between either Beasts and Rax or Rax and Mech would have the highest ceiling, but I think it's very viable.
Okay. Well, the topic of viability gets kind of into tournaments, right? It's very easy to say that such and such is the peak level or the highest level, etc. More when you have people who are playing these tournaments, playing these events. And obviously, as you get into casting, it's not just that you have this perspective from having played rank and you got more interested in playing all three races, but then you actually see people play all of these. Why get into casting? This is your first RTS. What drew you into the idea of casting these games?
One of the initial things that got me into it was I started casting when the community was kind of at its one of lower points when things were quieting down a bit. Uh, I wanted to do my part to try to help the community. It's something that I've been doing on and off for a long time now. Whenever I can help build interest or help people out to get people to stay, because as long as we still have a community, we still have Little War Game.
Right. So that if the idea there being, I assume, if there aren't many people around, maybe the thing that actually encourages them to stay is here's the video, here's a tournament, here's a cast, here's something to pay attention to kind of like drum up interest inside of them.
Mhm.
With yeah, so with that, with casting, one of the things I personally have liked about casting, and I've done a little bit here and there as well, is seeing people play, and you get to watch games between people that you're not nearly as good as. And even if you were, you would only be half of the people that you're watching play. Maybe you would take this game against this other person, or player A or player B. But now you get to watch players A and B match up against each other. Did you hit any new insights as you were watching people play against each other when you weren't a player?
Uh, oh, definitely. One of the main things that I've seen and learned a lot from is beast matchups. Like, for the longest time, I thought there's no way you could beat Mech with Beast. Until in the TeamLeague tournament, I saw Laba wipe the floor with Renus using Beast, and actually was one of the first times I saw someone reasonably defend a two-base all-in from a Mech player.
Right, because there had been a topic ongoing about the question of beast versus mech, and specifically with this idea of what if they do an early push? What if they do an attack? And so it must have been groundbreaking to watch people fight it off or hold it off. We'll just put it this way too. Like, did you experience or did you change your estimation of any players as you were watching the cast? For instance, if you watch people play, maybe you see them make mistakes or do something that's even more brilliant than you could have known because you're now casting them. You now have like the omniscient viewer's viewpoint.
I think so, yeah. Uh, one of the big things is with the full picture view, you can see a lot of the different small details, the timings, whether or not they chose to get an upgrade. You can get a better idea of what's their thought process. And you also can look at it with a clear head. You're not the one playing, so you can better rationalize, well, why might that impulse decision help them or hurt them down the line?
Okay. So another aspect of casting that's a bit underappreciated, I think, is a combination of informing the individual and exciting the individual. Because you have to appeal to the people who don't know as much, but want to get excited, want to see something to be amazed by or to be wowed by. And then there are also more experienced players who they don't want to feel like they're being talked down to or as if you're ignoring important parts of the game. How do you balance that in casting? Do you balance it?
I definitely think I'm a bit more milk toast,
Okay.
relatively bland compared to some of the other people that are casting. But what I try to do is I try to focus on explaining why someone might do something. A lot of that stems to in RTS games especially. It's there's just so many things you can do. How do you know what you're doing is the right thing? And one of the best ways to know is to use the successes or failures of others to determine that. So by seeing some of the higher skill players in matches, being able to explain why would they go for that expansion if they see a tower in the second, why would they get upgrades, why would they go for the push, those are the kinds of things that people have already spent days and days and days or even months in some cases to learn this is how you do it. so we can get a lot of the new players up to a similar level faster.
So you say that you're milk toast, so that kind of defies the convention. The idea that most people have is either you are the extremely brainy person. You know, they're colored by the idea of caster duos or trios in other games. You're either the extremely brainy person who breaks everything down and just says it matter of factly, as if you were doing a replay analysis as a player, or you're the person who drums up hype and gets excited. Do you think that this represents a middle road, or do you think that this is you diving into the analysis side more?
I think it's a bit more down the middle, because
Okay.
being alone, you don't have the ability to have the dichotomy of having that hype person with the knowledgeable person. You have to somehow manage to do both. It's one of the reasons why I insert all of my jokes in there.
Okay.
Not actual jokes, but I
a
try
bit.
to keep some people interested.
It's a bit of levity, right? Like if you're just talking dry analysis, that I know people who are on larger Reddits for other games won't believe this, but not everyone is the top 0.1111% or something of the player base. Even if you did release, all right, here we go, we're just going to do analysis in this calm Anchorman style voice, and this was the build. I don't think that would get anybody excited. So I think that it represents a good idea there to have this kind of concept of being in the middle. With that, a lot of casting. It sounds like you've picked up a lot of intricacies from players who maybe they've never even talked to you about them, but the game kind of informs them as to what to do. Would you advise that a new player who wanted to take your similar path, at least the competitive, improving in rank, improving in personal gameplay path, would you agree that they do what you do? That they go into all three races, or that they watch all the high level games they can? Would you have changed anything about that path?
I think I would
Okay.
suggest going into all three, get a base understanding. And the main thing about that is, let's say you only ever play Rex. Well, you know what Rex has to do for this or that, or whatever the case might be. That's perfect and dandy, but now you know how you think. If you want to be able to beat more opponents, you need to know how might they think. So now let's say you also play Barracks, if you play Beast. If you keep playing Beast against Rex, you know, well, how is Rex responding to whatever I do as Beast? Oh, this is how they're responding. What works well? What doesn't work well? It can give
Mhm.
you insights about your own build.
Okay. And it also sounds, I would suspect that it also gives you some variability. But the fact that you aren't pigeonholed into one role helps tremendously. Now, I know I will just go ahead and say for anyone who doesn't know, you were obviously on my team for the Little War Game, hopefully season one, TeamLeague. And we ended up winning that TeamLeague. And a lot of what that happened or was engaged in for you was you played every matchup. Like a lot of it went into preparing against specific opponents, figuring out what opponents would be on what maps within teams, and then saying, hey, that person has a bad matchup. Hobo, you can play all three races, go for it. Is that a strength? Do you think that people can be stronger almost naturally by playing all three races than playing one?
I do think there is a benefit to that, yeah. Uh, I don't think it would be best to spend all of your time doing all three. I do think it's better to try to have a single focus. But once you have that certain level of ability in each race, then it kind of blurs the line a bit more.
Okay. So with that, I'm just going to ask an awkward question because there we go. This is just what we do. Right now, Hobo, you're representing this idea of once you might have a favorite, but play all of them to competency, and then once you can, you may find that what is your favorite or what you consider the strongest. It can have variability. It can be against a specific opponent or is on a specific map, as I saw in that best of three you recently played. But I'm going to ask you this, Hobo. It's commonly said to newer players in other games that have these races or these factions, not just StarCraft or Blizzard RTSs. You can also take things like Praetorians or Age of Empires, etc., Rise of Nations comes to mind, it's commonly said pick one race or one faction. That's it. Just that. Is that a fundamental flaw? Is that how would you
Well,
teach a new person?
there's two main differences between LittleWarGame and a lot of these other games. The first is, yes, you could do that, but even if you're going Beast, Rex, or Mech, the economies, the builds, they're extremely similar. You're still getting the same skill sets. Where you make the buildings, you get gold at certain times, you get the units, and you, for the most part, can A move until you're in Div 3. Then the second difference is, again, the fact that you don't pick a single race from the start of the game. It gives you the freedom to transition into whatever you want. Even if you focus on a single race, you still have the ability to go into those other two. So until you get to that really competitive level at, let's say, arbitrary values ranked 3, that you really can go catapult wolf if you want. You can go archer soldier. You can go soldier into dragon. There's not really the same restriction that you have in other games. You always have everything available, and as such, you should try to use it.
So after talking with Hero of Ages, his idea, and he presented an interesting one, and one that you've been playing a while, and you can share this sentiment, or you will understand where I'm coming at with this sentiment. He expressed the idea that maybe the future was in hybridization, in mixing armies of different races or factions together, because as you said, in Little Wargame, unlike those other games, you're not locked out of playing the units from another faction. If you want to go Dragon, Mage, Catapult, you're more than welcome to do it. The game itself won't stop you. It has a soft limitation in the form of upgrades, but not a hard limitation that you're unable to do so. And throughout Little Wargames history, there have been players that experimented here and there with things like, maybe Archer Wolf, or maybe Gatling Gun Wolf, or maybe Soldier Catapult. Do you think that's a dead end?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of ones that have viability. A great example, again, like I was saying before, if you do Catapult Archer, you don't even need upgrades on catapults to make them a deadly asset to your army. One good shot can damage or even kill 5 archers, or it can kill a handful of wolves. So, in that regard, the upgrades might not be as important, but especially for mid-game pushes, if you can counter your opponent just by the merit of your army, you can overcome that upgrade advantage. Something that I haven't seen people do before, but I think would be extremely viable, would be Gyrocraft with soldiers and airships with more soldiers. I think that has potential doing something.
Okay, I know we're diving into a tangent here, but it's an interesting tangent. Why would that be a particularly powerful combination of units? Like, how do you model the game that you see that? Because yeah, we'll just go there. How would you deal with things like flying or other drops or any of that? What makes you think that that would be particularly powerful among the unexplored options?
Mostly for the mobility. You'd be able to force surrounds with the soldiers. The Gyrocraft can almost always be attacking. It prevents stuff such as counter drops if they're trying to drop units into your own base, if they're trying to attack with catapults. It is weak to stuff like ballista, but by that point you could probably transition as well. But really, the mobility and the fact that you can be all over the map if you have your melee units, the tanky soldiers, with the Gyrocraft right behind. You can catch up to beast players. You can deal with mech armies decently well. The catapults can only attack the soldiers who are walking in the middle of the catapults, just for an example.
So you're kind of taking the idea that people, when they combine the airships and catapults, yeah, the catapult has low speed, but the airship gets around it. In this case, picking up the soldiers would slightly increase their speed, but more what it would do is it would make sure that the soldiers are among the enemy army, not chasing the enemy army. And then you would deal you would use the mobility of the gyrocrafts from there.
Mm-hmm. I think that is something that could be a good example of how two races could be used in unison. I haven't tried it, but it sounds like it could work.
Okay. Part of watching all of these players in these casts, and when you're going through the casts, and as you were playing in ranked, involves finding out what their unique strengths are. Um, so I'm going to post a stickler question to you. Not a simple one. We're not going to ask who do you think is the best player. No, we're going to ask, is there any player you think is using the wrong style or the wrong race? Because you've played Mech and Beast and Rax, and you've seen some of the power of these hybrids. Is there any player that you ever thought, man, with your skill set, you would be killer at this?
I think Norm plays too much Rex.
Okay, there we go. Come on, come on. You gotta expand on that. Come on, that's sick. Why?
He just posted a matchup between him and a clanmate where he played against he played BVR and he played pretty decent Beast. He has the skill sets to do just about anything. It's not in his comfort zone though. He hasn't really gotten enough experience playing the three different factions, but I think he has the micro and macro, behind it that could support him doing those. Especially with he used to do a lot of soldier drops or raider drops into people's bases. Just switch those with catapults, and he already has the mechanisms down.
Okay, so you do. Hero of Ages danced around this topic when I talked to him, but that what you just said there about the nature of Rax and Norm's skill set kind of lines into it. So I'm going to just ask, do you feel that Rax has appropriate representation to express those skills? Because it sounded as if you were saying Norm has either too much skill or can't express all of it by playing Rax. Is that a mischaracterization?
I'd say a little bit. There is something that a lot of Rax players do not use as much as I think they could. uh, Mages can be as effective, if not more effective, than catapults for drops.
Okay.
Not only that, you can put 5 mages in an airship, go parallel with your army. If your army meets their army, just drop the mages behind. You don't even need vision to send fireballs and kill half of their back line.
Okay.
So I'd say it's more of an unexplored avenue in recent games. A lot of people have not been. I've seen Norm go a lot of priests, but he doesn't usually go mages, which I think could strengthen his build.
So with that, we're going to get into something that, look, if people have not followed a competitive scene before, they're going to feel like this is a bit lost in the woods, right? And for very, very well developed scenes, it's a little bit different than this. But I feel that the role of tournaments, in part, is to affect the meta. What I mean by that is that as players could think that anything is possible and everything is viable, and this game matters and this game doesn't quite matter, etc. But when there's tournaments, when people have something to play for, even if it's just the honor or the pride of winning the tournament, it's kind of the scalpel through which are shown to be more or less viable. Um, do you think that there's any aspect of, do you think that the lack of tournaments as of late has stifled or impacted negatively the meta?
Mm, in part, I'd say yes, since, at least in recent times, a lot of the competitiveness has been either between very few people or between oftentimes guests. Uh, I'd say the best way to get a wave of that competitive energy that would be the force of change would be a tournament, probably. If we had more players, it would be a bit different. But
Okay.
since we are lacking in that very competitive community at current, is why a tournament would be the device for change.
Okay. So with that, we're kind of getting into the area that we've been dancing around for a while, which is you play these games and you cast these games. And we've talked about the mechanism for tournaments to change possibly the meta or to make people come to terms with perhaps their own weaknesses or things of that nature. But what kind of tournaments would you like? Because here, I'll give you a bad tournament format. Ready? All right, guys. We're just gonna play best of one on Le Petit, and that's what we're gonna play the tournament on. So, how would you? And, that wouldn't be good for getting any kind of feedback or understanding of how the game looks. What kind of tournament structure do you like?
Personally, I'm very partial to the best of three option for tournaments. It
Okay.
gives players a chance to throw a game, but demonstrate, yeah, I may have lost that game, but I still am generally able to beat this person, so I should go on to the next round. It gives that kind of opportunity for both players.
Okay.
Uh,
Do you like double elimination or any other quirks of tournament play like that?
I do like double elimination. The biggest issue is the time consumption of it,
Okay.
since especially for small groups like this, it can be hard to organize everyone to be there the same day or even the same time. We don't have enough players to have like a North American tournament or a European tournament or an Asian tournament. So everyone kind of has to rely on each other's time schedules. So it can be a bit of a logistics nightmare.
I mean, also, you're one of the few people who does casting. So if a double elimination tournament happens, that directly affects the number of hours that perhaps you cast or you feel responsible for casting. What do you think of tournaments held over multiple days? I mean, a protracted example would have been the TeamLeague, but even a best of three single elimination or double elimination tournament. Do you think that that would be a workable solution? What do you think of that?
I'd say yes, but again, you have the issue of people's availability. It's hard to get everyone in the same place for that amount of time, even 2 or 3 days in a row. And if it is split up between multiple weeks, how do you keep the interest going?
Okay. Do you have any suggestions for that? I mean, you cast these tournaments, and as I said, people who cast the tournaments in Little War Game tend to also be the tournament organizers and also responsible for prize distribution. You wear many hats, as it were. So if you could put on the hat of, you know, fixing that problem, how would you do that?
I would say you have to interact with the players, get them individually invested. Like, try. Uh, I don't want to quite say rig the matches so much as try to get matchups that the players would want to go to that match. Like if you're about to start a tournament and you see that your first opponent is Dragon Archer Z, do you bother playing?
For
But
those who don't
uh,
know, the context is that Dragon Archer Z is probably the strongest player, or one of definitely the strongest players to have ever played the game, and the
mm,
winner of a huge number of recent, like past year or two tournaments. Okay, so you're saying if you see him, do you want to play?
so you kind of have to balance it out. You need to make it so the best two people aren't going to fight each other in round one. But at the same time, you can't have uh, just completely uneven matchups across the board. If you don't think you have a chance of winning, then why participate in the tournament? You need a reason too. Maybe you are going because you want to try and you want to learn from the game you are going to lose. Uh, so I guess one of the issues we have with LittleWarGame is the fact that of the competitive people, there's such a large range, and it's so hard to determine, hey, do you fit in this subgroup or that subgroup? And what is the general difference between this subgroup and that subgroup? If
Okay,
you want an effective tournament, you need to have the players all of at least a similar level where you're able to take a game off of someone. That way, even if you're seed 16 and you're fighting seed 1, you know you can get a win off of them, so you know it's possible.
okay. So this leads into multiple areas, but the first area I'm going to take is as follows. You mentioned if I don't think I'm going to win, what is the purpose in playing? Now, a lot of people know. To some people, that's just not the case. I'm sure there are some people who think, yeah, if I'm the 16th player out of 16, that's still better than the 17th person who didn't play in the tournament at all. But at the same time, part of it. Do you think prize support has anything to do with this? Like, if you feel that maybe getting 16th is valuable or has some benefit, would that change? Does that change how bad you feel if your first round opponent is Dragon Archer Z?
I think a lot of it depends on your own viewpoint. Like myself, I actually had a situation where Dragon Archer Z was going to be my second opponent in a tournament, and I still played and lost to Invisible Werewolves.
Okay,
They listened to the game.
That's demoralizing.
But again, it's really up to the individual player. If you're going in it, you're trying to do something, you're trying to get the prize at the end, and you realize just from the beginning, wow, I just lost to the number one player. I feel cheated, so to speak. So I think it's really a lot of the individual players, and I think that's why if we were able to get groups where even the worst player in the tournament has a chance of beating the top player, that way it's a bit more balanced. There's one sec. I was gonna sneeze.
Okay.
So you have a feeling that, yeah, you might be seated the lowest, but you have a chance. You can win. The TeamLeague tournament's an example of that, where it wasn't just one player against one player, it's the four players of a team. Our team was the sixth seeded. We were by far the worst rated, but we were able to pull through the win because, yes, we were the lowest seeded team, but there was enough variability that we had the chance to beat the number one.
Now, a lot of people who are going to be watching this were part of that team league in one form or another. At the very least, they knew of it and watched the games or listened to the games. For anyone who doesn't know of it, can you just go into the structure of it a little bit and maybe, in doing so, explain why it was a bit of a better format in your estimation?
So, in loose terms, the team league had 6 teams of 4 players, where the 4 players were each of different skill levels, with the top 1 person in each of the teams being the captain, and being, I believe, what were ranked the top 6 players by the community at the time. From there, they were able to pick their other 3 people that would be participating on the team. There were it was a team matchup style, so there are several rounds of the tournament where Team 1 fights Team 6 one weekend, and in that same weekend, 2 fights 5, and then 3 fights 4. And then the next week in round 2, let's say Team 1 faces Team 5, and so on and so forth. So everyone was able to play each of the teams once, and then a second time, I believe, depending on where we ranked up,
Okay.
leading to the final in the end. I think it was over, a month and a half?
Yeah, it was over something like that.
I,
What,
one of the
go on, my bad.
one of the main successful aspects of that was the fact that it was a team endeavor. You had to work together. So the team members were what were motivating everyone to keep playing, keep going, even if you don't think you're going to win your matchup, especially where you can lose one of your games and still win your team set.
To explain a missing component of this, it wasn't as simple as you just picked your ace player and sent them out and they just stomped everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you had to submit lineups beforehand and say of the 4 players, this player is playing this game on this map. That's it.
Without knowledge of what order they were doing.
Right. And if you won the game for your team, that's it. You don't keep playing until you lose. That's it. You just won the game for your team. And then there was an ace match component, so that if you did have, if you got to a tie and you did have the number 1 strongest player, you could conceivably clutch it out at the end. Do you think that a format like that was good for just the engagement of people outside of those initial starting top 6?
It motivated people to keep showing up each week to do that tournament. If we had more ways of motivating people, such as those, that's how we can start getting successful tournaments here. Because we can't do 20-person tournaments in one day. That's just not feasible. But if we have people motivated to want to come back, they think they can win, they want to participate, they want to go there for the competition, then we can get those successful tournaments of 20, 30 people over the span of 2-3 weeks.
Okay. So the equivalency there would be you don't want to, you want something like a bowling league, not a bowling tournament, because not everyone can bowl 300 or 290. I guess the equivalence in LittleWarGame would be like I might have I have definitely won less than 5 games ever, for instance, against AC. I think that's an accurate statement. But at the same time, in this Team League format, which AC and I both participated in, I got the sense that my effort and my practice and the things I was working on were important. Now, obviously, that's self-congratulatory because we were on the same team, so I don't expect you to say, actually, it didn't help at all, and we could have done it without you. But I see what your point is.
Go on.
No, that was it. No, you were about to say?
I was going to say another way that we could get around some of that issue is if we had 2 tournaments or, as you put it, leagues going in tandem. One of the quote, if we want to use Renus's terminology, the quote pro class and the
Okay.
quote guest herds. No. So if we had the more skilled players playing in one tournament and at the same time have a less skilled but still wanting to do something competitive tournament going at the exact same time,
No,
that
that's
way we get both groups actively playing other people and against people that they have chances of actually beating or at least learning from.
No, I had never heard of that. This is the first I've heard of you say it. This is the first I've even heard of such a thing suggested. But part of the brilliance of that suggestion is in much, I don't follow European soccer or European football. I don't, okay, personally. But even I know that they have different stratums of leagues, right? The people at the top, I'm just going to say, like, pretend the leagues are A to Z. You don't have people in League A playing against people in League D. Because the people in League D, by and large, don't have a chance. And then they have a promotion system where if you do very well in your league, you go up, and if you do very poorly in your league, you go back down. So your suggestion would be make like simultaneously running events, and then hey, if you want to just show that you're the best, you can be in this league. But understand that your entry in this league to try and win and smash, maybe it's better supported by prizes, maybe it has more like out of game rewards or in game rewards. So you want to go in there, you want to win. But if you attend that, you can't be in this second rung of tournaments, let's say. It would be like the difference between a professional and amateur level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really
I
interesting.
I think that would go a long ways towards helping get people more motivated. Because if they play someone that's similar to their skill level, they can play a game that's longer than 2 minutes and potentially learn something from that. But if they go into it, this is like their second game ever, first game of the tournament, and they're playing against Titano Circus doing a double proxy racks into Raiders.
I've definitely
What are
done
they
that
gonna
before.
learn? How are they gonna be motivated?
No, and then they're gonna find out that, oh wait, but that guy didn't even get to the semifinals. Like, okay, I knew that going in. I signed up for that, but I agree with your point. That would be enormously demoralizing to a person who just wanted to play. How would you? I mean, I know this is a hypothetical of a hypothetical. Again, it seems we're getting into all of those. But how would you stop people or discourage people from just saying, yeah, my name isn't Dragon Archer Z, so I'm just going to sign up for the second ring of. I'm just going to sign up for the second ring of tournaments and sandbag. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think one way we could do it would be a showcase match. So if they can play a match and send us the replay, And
Okay.
that can also be a good thing for maybe we do something to hype before the tournament. We can demonstrate the show match, maybe talk a little bit about what we're expecting to see from the player in the tournament, so on and so forth. And that could be a good way to, based off how you perform in that match, we can place you into either A or B, so to speak.
Okay. Using kind of
And that
like
way,
using win loss or the subjective judgment of the people
the
watching the
judgment of
replays.
how they perform.
Okay.
You can send a game you lost, but like just again to go back to that best of three with Silver Boss, if you look to that first game with the mages, yeah, I lost on paper, but I was holding my own for longer than really was reasonable.
Right. No one would look at that and say Silver Boss stomped Hobo. Hobo is a scrub. Hobo needs to go down a tier. I guess then the final question on this tangent would be how would you incentivize people to want to win those show matches and get into the more difficult bracket? Is it as simple as better prize support?
It could be something like that. Um, I'm not entirely sure the best way to motivate a lot of the people. I already said I'm more of the milk toast end. I don't find as many things as exciting either,
Okay.
but a lot of the stuff I do for the game is out of love for the game. So that's already enough to get me into tournaments. Uh, that's why I try to talk to a lot of people, see if I was to host a tournament, what would you want as a reward? What would get you interested in playing or participating? Trying to get the feedback from the people who would actually be doing it.
Okay. And maybe there is, maybe I don't want to talk about what area that this brings to mind for me because there's no reason to get potentially demonetized or have to hash, like trash part of the video. I'll just say it is familiar to me the idea that maybe you can compete on this different tier of play and you don't have as many in-game rewards. You don't have skins or you don't have cash prizes or you don't have in-game currency, but maybe the fact that you could win and it would be casted and taken seriously as an ongoing league or tournament would be reward enough for you. Like I I would not be in a B tier or a second tier like the amateur tier to use
It
Rhinus's
might make you a C.
terminology. Yeah, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I need to go down a level. My point is if Rhinus were having his pro class tournament, right? If I'm in there at all, it's at the very bottom of it. But and I, Atano Circus, wouldn't want to be one level down or in an easier group. I would rather take that loss and just know how I did overall. But if I weren't Atano Circus, if I were just a person with my skill who wasn't me, yeah, maybe the reward is that you can go play against those other
Uh,
people and you can have the chance to win. You know?
One way I would see it if I was invited and I was in that middle range between high B and low A is sure I could go in B, but if I just stomp everyone, then what's the fun in it? But if I go in A, I'm gonna lose, but I get the recognition to be within this group of more competitive people being recognized by the competitive community. I also get to play against people who might actually teach me something so I can get even better and potentially get further up in A.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'll bring back to mind the story about the DC, about Destroy Call, the guy who was our lead for the TeamLeague season one. A part of the reason he was not one of those people who got to form a team was that he fought all the way to the finals in an April 2020 tournament. And at the April 2020 tournament, he had beaten, I think, AC and a couple of other well-known people on the way. And then he played against Dragon Archer Z, and yes, he lost 1-3. But if you watch those games, it wasn't the stomp that 1-3 seems to indicate. And even Dragon Archer Z, I remember reading a comment from him where he said, "Yeah, Destroy Call honestly surprised me. I didn't know that he could do that." So it's
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying. Like, yeah, if Destroy Call had played, if there was a concurrent tournament that it was of a lower level, let's say, or of a not Rhinus pro class level, then maybe Destroy Call doesn't get those kudos. Maybe he wins that entire tournament and people say, yeah, but who did you play? Um,
Mhm.
yes, that's a very interesting idea and something to go forward with. Uh, with that, we've kind of covered casting and tournaments and the role of tournaments in the meta and the player base. Actually, let's get your thoughts on that. So, with the player base right now, we've had version 4.3 come out, and thank goodness, because frankly, a number of longtime players had been leaving or had not been logging in or paying as much attention. I know that behind the scenes, there's worried on the part of some of the mods, developers, people like that, about how are people finding the game? Are people joining back into the game? I personally have some optimism because I've seen a couple of names show up that, when was the last time RJ or Auxilies were in? A long time ago, but they're coming back now. So, in between those two perspectives, or perhaps hard on either side, what do you think of the player base? What do you think of the level of people's play? Any way you want to take that question.
Uh, I'd say there's a couple different groups. Uh, from my experience, I've interacted with a lot of the aspects of the community just by virtue of trying to be a jack of all trades, master of none. I interact with the map makers, I interact with people who play mods, I interact with the people who are competitive, I even interact with the people who just post memes on the Discord.
Okay.
Uh, a lot of people have a lot of different inspirations for why are they interested in the game, why are they coming back. You've got people who just play Value 2 all day or just play Raid Wars. Uh, a lot of the people who stay or who get here and stay have some underlying motivation that keeps them going. Some reason. Oftentimes it's just like, this is a pastime that I love doing. I love beating everyone in Raid Wars. I love just the fact that I can see the wonders of this map. Or a lot of people play, I want to say it's Cure Arena.
Yeah, Hero Arena 3v3 or Hero Arena Ice. Yep.
A lot of people like a lot of those different things. There's something for everyone in the game. Uh, as for a lot of the 1v1 players, I think a lot of the times people leave when they see stagnation. They don't see new blood coming in. They don't see themselves getting better. They don't see them being able to beat certain people, or they just keep beating another person who's not getting better. So there's a lot of stagnation in the 1v1 scene, especially when you don't have people really going into the ranked. The ranked system right now means basically nothing, since you could lose the occasional game to someone who's actually good, or you could play 30 noobs and get up to Division 1 or Gamma, Beta, Alpha even, if you play enough against people who aren't very good.
Depends on your definition of scrub at that point, right?
Mm. But
Okay.
it's more to the point that the ranked system in its own right doesn't give you a good idea of how good the player is. Sure, their name says Division 1 or Division 3, but they play as good as, let's say, Lava, who is a very strong player. Or maybe they play even worse and they're in the wrong division just because of the number of people they beat. And then even from the other end, if you're just new to this game and you want to get into competitive, and you keep getting the ranked queue and you keep losing to the same 1, 2, 3 people to the same build, what are you going to learn? And what reward is there if you're going a solid 1 to 12 for your win-loss ratio?
Okay.
It's not the thing that's going to keep people playing. Uh, I do think that if we had a larger ranked community like we did, like you were saying, in 2017, 2016, then it would be a bit more meaningful and maybe again a motivator to get some people to stay. But as it is right now, it's less of a thing to show skill level and more a thing for bragging rights.
Do you think that there is an easy solution to that problem? One idea that I floated, for instance, is maybe the problem with ranked match is that one, it's very difficult to even find people to play against So perhaps lower the number of days of the week that ranked match is active so that, hey, everyone has to show up on Wednesday because whether you're in Australia or the United States of America or Germany or a Nordic country, this is the only day of the week that ranked is active. And perhaps reset rank so that everyone's badges are back to meaning nothing because they don't have them
I
anymore. What do you
I
think of these
don't think
solutions?
resetting it would solve the underlying problem. I think something like having it only be on Wednesdays could be a better solution because that funnels all the people who want to play to be able to do it at the same time. They can't just go on when most of the other decent players aren't on just to rack up free points against new players. Uh, Another thing is potentially suspending the ranked system until we get that larger player base
Okay.
and just have a tab for official melee maps. That way, if people want to do the competitive 1v1 or 2v2, they can go to play and go to the melee map section of the map browser and pick one of those ones.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So instead of going into a ranked match with a queue where they might not ever hit a person, or if they do hit a person, it's such a skill mismatch that it's hilarious. Just say we don't have enough people. Change it to, like you said, something like tutorials, where it brings up a predisposed selection of the maps, and then they can make custom lobbies. If they want to improve, I mean, I see most people, when they are playing against people of quality, and they want to try and test themselves, they're not going into ranked anyways. They're just making these play lobbies so that they can play against them in customs.
Mm-hmm. I think that could be a potential better solution in the intermittent until we start building up and getting more people on the competitive side of things.
Okay? The $1 million question that naturally follows from there is, Hobo, do you have any ideas for improving the number of players? And not just in ranked 1v1, but I'm sure that let's put it this way: everyone seems to have a pet theory as to what to do to, and the topic comes up endlessly. How do we make LittleWarGame bigger? How do we make it more attractive to newer players? How do we make the numbers in the lobby go up so there are more active people? What do you think
There's
of
a
this?
there's a couple things that could support that, I think. One of the main is making sure we get rid of as many of the inherent bugs and make the game as stable as possible so that you could play it on a Chromebook without having huge issues. Because I think moving forward, a lot of the people that this game would attract aren't the, let's say, 24-plus-year-olds who have water cooled Magnum PC able to handle anything. It's going to be a lot of your, let's say, teens, 18, 15, 16, towards 18, 19, 20. A lot of people who have a Chromebook can't do a lot of these other things that are looking for an RTS. Uh, if we could do things that could appeal towards those kind of groups, that's one of the reasons why mods are so successful right now. It's people who are just trying to have a good time with the device that they have.
Okay, so you actually then go more into the business reality side, which is, hey, the game is under the umbrella of addictinggames.com. That was a website that formerly hosted, flash games for. I mean, I remember myself being a high schooler and knowing about Addicting Games and Miniclip and all of these other websites that do exactly that. And I was just playing on a derpy school computer. This is back before all those websites were banned off by
Firewalls.
by firewalls and group policy and things of that nature on the IT side. But I just played literally the derpy games that I could on my derpy computer. And so you said, let's feed into that reality. Like, you're not dealing with people who have, like you said, I did have a water cooled system, but now that I'm over 30, I have to get rid of it, as one does. So you think just be real, be cognizant of who the player base is.
Because if someone has the option of, hey, StarCraft 2 is free, or hey, this random browser game is free, which one is going to pull that person in more?
I mean, if they're of that age, I don't know personally. There's a lot of
If
factors that go into that.
Because I know for myself, at least, back in 2017, when I was in high school, uh, given I had a Chromebook, I could not play the games I wanted to play, so I found this game. Was this my favorite game ever? No. But it was something that I could play and that I eventually started to be pretty decent at. But that had to start somewhere. So by getting the people while they're looking for something, if they see this game, they get into it, and they learn that this game actually has a lot to offer, even if it's not as bombastic and impressive as other games like Warcraft 3 Reforged, that there's still value to playing this game.
Yeah. And that's kind of how your path, what your path was, right? Like you've been here now for 4 years. You've done all of these things because you started off in this game, because you could run this game.
Mm-hmm.
Makes perfect sense. With that, Hobo, are there any other final topics? Maybe something we didn't go over or didn't discuss that has your interest?
Mm,
It's the nature of
not
these things.
sure.
It's the nature of these things that you'll immediately think of it as soon as this gets out. You'll be like, "Oh, I should have asked about whatever the case may be." So, with that, I know that you have a YouTube channel. If you want to plug that, reach out to anybody. Do you have any final thoughts?
Sure. My YouTube channel is Hobo Turtles at YouTube. I do have a Twitch. It's not used as much. Um, Going into 2021, I am thinking of trying to plan out a bit more structured tournaments instead of just making them out on the fly impulsively. I want to try to get some kind of schedule and work on that in the background. That way, maybe not in February, but going into either April or towards May, we have some kind of idea of things we can do. And if people know about the tournament in advance, they know how to get into the tournament. Maybe there's some kind of qualifier that they have to beat. So by having that, there's a goal, and people can be getting hyped up, getting ready for it, and that will get them invested to want to keep working at it.